Welcome to Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. I'm your host, Dean Anderson, and on today's show, we have Cynthia Aguiar. I said it right. Yes. I nailed it.
You did.
I did. Cynthia, we had the pleasure of meeting, and people who do watch the show will recognize you from a previous episode from SoCon, where we interviewed you. And I found it fascinating, and you had this great vibe, and I thought, you know what, this is somebody I would like to talk to more about dance and your life experiences. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The dancing part is the real thing that grabs my attention, because I recognize that in the addiction worlds that we talk about so much, we talk a lot about the psychological, and we talk about the social, and we talk about some of the physical, but there's something in there that the arts are overlooked. So I would love it if you could just share a bit of your experience with dancing and what it means to you.
I've been dancing, I want to say pretty much my entire life. I mean, we're all kind of dancers, right? When we're young, we're always dancing. And it's been such a great tool in terms of my own healing and my own journey. And so it's been a big part of my life. And so when I started my movement company, it was important for me to be able to create a space where people could storytell actually through their movement. That's actually how it started. Because sometimes there's things that we can't necessarily put into words, but we can put into movement. And so it allows us to process whatever it is that we're going through, whether it is a recovery or just, we're grieving, maybe it's a celebration. We use dance in all parts of our lives. So it's been something that I've been very passionate about. And we know the health benefits of dance. We know, we're using both sides of our brains. We know that it has it can reduce the chances of things like dementia. It'll bring up your serotonin. It has a beautiful community aspect. There's a cultural aspect. So dance has all of these different sides to it that we can use at any time we want and need in terms of a life tool.
I think when we think about dance, a lot of people think about the limitations, or we all watch, So You Think You Can Dance or Dancing with the Stars, and we see these really sexy people that are physically fit. Yeah. Break down that. Tell me how it's not true.
Yeah, no, and that's why I don't call it a dance company.
Okay.
Because then people kind of back up and say, well, I'm not a dancer. But everyone moves through life in their own way. Everyone has danced in their life, whether it's in a celebration, whether it was when you were a child, and then they had that fear of, okay, I don't identify as a dancer and therefore I cannot dance. So that's why I'm very intentional about calling it a movement company, because then it welcomes everybody in terms of entering that space or using that tool. So yes, it becomes scary when we use the word dance, but dance or movement is really for everybody. It could be as much as representing a word that you're needing to explore with the shape that you're creating. So in terms of my own movement workshops, often those that come to my movement workshops are people who are not quote unquote dancers. They're those who are wanting to explore movement to help them heal, to help them move energy through, to help them process, or to help tell their stories. And then it's clear that everyone can move, everyone can dance. So I think creating a healthy environment is important to break that barrier, because it can be used for anybody. Anybody can dance, anybody can move. And so I think it's important, if you are entering the movement world or you're wanting to explore dance, enter it in a space or go into a space where they'll tell you that whatever you do is perfect. There's no right or wrong way. And I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to talk about the storytelling in a second, but that last thing you just said, there's a sense of, and I talk with people all the time about this idea of everything I do, I should be perfect at, or I should be like, I should step on the basketball court and shoot 3-pointers right off the bat. And there's this mindset when we watch and compare, there's something really important about stepping into environments where you're not an expert, or being able to be fallible, right? I don't even know if that's the right choice of words, but but that creative expression comes from being able to be creative, right?
Absolutely. I think it's just being. I think even in a, say a movement workshop, sometimes in the exercise, you're like, I don't know what to do. My body just wants to be here. That's still a form of movement. It's an intentional, just staying, not necessarily dancing or doing like a big movement, but I think it's actually stepping back into your body and listening and saying, what do you need? And so anything you do is perfect, even if in that moment you just need to be, even in that moment if you just need to witness. It's honoring your needs, and it's coming back to whatever's feeling good for you in the moment. So I do always start by saying whatever you do is perfect, because you could just come off and witness for a second, step back in. You could just kind of do a gentle sway, and if that's what your body needs, that's what your body needs. So it's coming from a place of self-love and creating an environment that promotes that, but also then everybody else is, in our groups are supporting that as well. So you walk out of there feeling loved and supported, and like you were able to move some energy through, and maybe process whatever you needed. And if not, you brought up your serotonin by just moving and just by being with people and like-minded people that support you.
So that space, that ability to kind of just do whatever feels right to you, and being perfect in that environment sounds very welcoming and like accepting. And I recognize with mental health and with the work I do in addiction that being able to feel trust or vulnerability they're hard spots for a lot of people to be in. So this sounds like a conduit to that.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to not only feel seen, so being able to maybe share their stories in the way that they want to, but they need to feel safe in their environment. So it's creating that space and breaking that barrier in terms of what dance is, and saying, there's a place for the performance dance. You go on stage and there's professional dancers and they're creating these great shapes. But in terms of using dance as a tool for healing, where we can make it accessible for everybody, it's important to create that space where you come in and you say, this is the hour where I get to be mindful, where I get to actually honor what my body's saying and what it needs, where I get to focus on my breath, where I get to be around people that are doing the same. And in these workshops, often your eyes are kind of closed, or nobody's really looking at you because there's no performance aspect of it. So it really is just your own time to step back into your body, and to move and create shapes that you want. And sometimes we laugh, and that's okay. It's kind of like whatever comes out was meant to be, and that there's zero judgment.
Awesome. There's an Einstein quote. He says, if you want your kids to be really intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be even more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. That idea that in today's world, we kind of push the creativity out of our youngsters and say, just recite information and do that. So like I promised, I had more questions about storytelling, this idea. It's fascinating, the power of creativity, but how does that, for everybody else out there that doesn't know, how do you storytell in movement? What does that look like?
So I think it depends on what I'm doing in terms of like the company, but I think say in a workshop where for somebody who maybe hasn't taken many dance classes or movement classes, so where it would be kind of new, we would generally start by journaling. So I would have like journal prompts actually, and we would set an intention in terms of what you're needing from this movement workshop. Because what I need from this movement workshop might be different than you. So it becomes this, okay, what do I need in this moment, and how can I relate it to the theme? Sometimes we have a theme and we relate it back to that. But then it's kind of open-ended. And then from that, you would maybe develop some movements and it would be through guided movement, but that represent a certain word that shares your story in that way. And then we would continue with that, and then we would explore the elements of dance to then create a clear picture of what it is that you're trying to say. So there's things like that we do. Sometimes in terms of being able to create work in terms of a company with my company members. Sometimes I would put on like a residency. So we would rent out a space for a week we would pretty much almost live there for the week, and I would come up with the prompts for this piece. This is what we're discussing. How does your story relate to this? And then we all collectively come up with the movements to tell our stories. And then it creates these conversations that are deep, that are real, and the movement then becomes very authentic. So often when we're creating a professional way, we are creating from discussion, from community, from our own stories. And we're often talking more than we're actually moving. And then we put it into movement. And then it flows into all the different pieces, and it creates kind of a show that anyone can come relate to. So movement, again, is for everyone. You can use it as a healing tool for anybody who has danced and is maybe a professional dancer and is actually stepping out of that perfect dance role where you have these perfect lines and this, the dancer like we see on TV. It's almost hard for them to kind of step out of that constriction and being in that box of like, this is what a dancer looks like, and breaking free and actually just using movement as a tool to tell your story. And then there's also the opportunity for those who have never done that, which often we find is easier for them to actually move because they aren't constricted. So sometimes those workshops are actually easier for non-technical dancers because they don't have these rules that they've been kind of taught in terms of how to move their body. So there's an opportunity to storytell for anyone through movement. And sometimes it's easier because we can't put it into words. But if you say, okay, well, how do you stand when you feel this way? What does that look like? Without trying to create a movement, like how do you stand? How do you walk through life when you're feeling this way? Then you get to embody the feelings that you and the person you maybe want to be or you want to continue to grow to be. So there's a lot of opportunities.
In the addiction world, I'm constantly telling people we're emotional people that don't like emotions, all right? Yes. And we have these struggles and these ideas, and part of that creates psychological barriers to get to the source of the feeling and the emotion. And this sounds like a very emotional experience where we then get to be fluid and tap into emotional expression through movement.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of feel it to heal it, right? You have to let it come into your body to then allow it to float away. So whenever we are having this, whether it's a trigger or something that is affecting us, blocking it out is going to create a lot of tension and stress. And so if we can sit in a safe space and allow ourselves to feel it for a second and breathe through it. And in movement, we learn tools, breathing techniques that allow us to get back into our bodies and focus on our breath. So it's also very mindful, which is very important in terms of healing and being present in the moment and being able to release those feelings. We have to feel it, which is uncomfortable, but I think doing it with others in a very safe space is very productive.
We just had someone on the show recently talking about mindfulness and the power of that. How is that incorporated into the work that you're doing? And like in the process of movement, people would think that it's a very cerebral thing and I have to be here and doing this, but I'm guessing that's not true.
Yeah, I think movement is meant to be a mindful exercise. In terms of a workshop, we would actually do a body scan before we start anything. Well, actually, the first thing we would do is get to know the space, because that's important too. If you want to feel safe to move, you have to feel safe in the space. So not only with the people, but like getting comfortable with your surroundings. And then we would do a body scan and make sure that you are, feeling where you're holding tension, and then using our breath to release some of that. And then we go into these stretches, and we know that, our energy centers, we can hold a lot of tension in those spots. So like, how can we twist, release energy? Sometimes if you just tap yourself on the back, that can really reduce some anxiety and some stress. We have, the box breath technique. So we intentionally incorporate those things to be able to then say, after this movement workshop, not only did it feel good, but now I can walk away with these tools. So it's also something you can do at home. You can do a bit of a meditation or a mindful breath and practice, put that in practice, and then just move your body however it feels like moving. Turn your lights off and see how you want to move, and then do a body scan and see, how do I feel? And is it different from when I began? So it's not about teaching somebody how to move. It's by giving them the tools to then move how they want to move. important. And anyone could do that at home.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to have more from Cynthia Aguiar in a second. She's going to tell us all the great things about dance and movement. There's more to come after this break. Welcome back to Invisible: Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction. We're having a great chat with Cynthia Aguiar. Aguiar. Oh,
You got it.
I got it.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm practicing and I'm
That's
reciting
okay.
it in my
You got
head.
it the second time.
So I'm seeing all of these connections to mental health and dance and movement. And part of the reason why I had you on the show is because I know that you had incorporated dance into your own healing journey.
Absolutely.
And I would be honored, and I'm sure our audience would be honored if you'd be able to share some of that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was in a car accident in October 2021 and suffered a severe concussion and whiplash and some other injuries. And I was dancing a lot up to that point, and it kind of put everything to a halt. And so firstly, it was kind of like, how do I get my balance back? And a lot of parts of me were very, affected. And I think, that's the thing too, concussions are a bit misunderstood. And even I didn't have an understanding of how long the recovery would take. So we're going on 2 years and I am still recovering. But movement and light movement, and again, not putting those expectations on myself of needing to be this dancer with these lines and the technique behind it, but just moving to heal was an important part of my journey. So moving helped me get my balance back. I was able to slowly get back into the dance world and back into my company, and I had wonderful company members that kind of took over for me for a while. And but the concussion very much changed my life in terms of wellness, in terms of my habits, in terms of my own beliefs, in terms of the people I surround myself with, and then especially in terms of movement, using that as a tool to continue my recovery, and especially in terms of taking care of your mental health, because mental health, you really have to work very hard to take care of your mental health after concussion. And it was very hard. It's certainly the lowest I've ever felt in my life was through this process. So, it's a form of recovery and how we can use movement to help us through that process.
Mm-hmm. Right before the break, you were talking about feeling through sensations in our body and going through those, experiencing and sitting in those things. And I don't know if a lot of people recognize this, but there's several therapies and treatments and EMDR and different types of therapeutic things that they go into, compassion inquiry, they go into those spaces of their body and be able to look and expand and feel what's going on and work through that. Yeah. Did that play a role, those type of things that you're talking about, play a role in your healing journey?
Absolutely. I think, and I had to gain more of them. I think now what I've learned through my concussion are more breathing techniques, more stepping into your body and recognizing where the tension's coming from, more different quick ways to get your body into kind of a parasympathetic mode, because it's easy to go into fight or flight after a concussion. Our nervous systems are just under so much stress. So it's all of these tools that I had that were able to help, but I've gained so many in this process, which part of me then thinks, sometimes I do believe that everything kind of happens for a reason. And I see the purpose in this in terms of helping me in my own practice and in my own healing journey to then be able to share what worked for me in terms of, getting in touch with our nervous systems and how to calm it down and how to release any stress and anxiety and overwhelm through movement. Movement, we're not talking about dance, like these big dance moves. We're talking about tapping yourself on the back. We're talking about breath. We're talking about sways. We're talking about all these things that are designed to support us as humans and humans that often need to heal. Mm-hmm.
So these tapping and swaying sound a lot like self-soothing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Things like, EFT, like actually like the tapping technique, emotional freedom technique is something that I incorporated a lot and is something that I now teach. they're essential. I especially as a single mother, you know, momming with a concussion, single momming with a concussion was just so hard. And so I needed these tools, and thank goodness for movement, because it really did help me in those very, very, very difficult moments. Mm-hmm.
So bringing up being a mother, how does that segue all of this mental health and movement, how does that segue into being a parent?
It's helped me a lot as a parent. I think, actually going into maybe doing something that we love as a parent, I think, and I don't want to generalize, I think the mom guilt is real, certainly for all parents, but for myself, I felt a lot of guilt actually going to a movement class or incorporating more of that, because then you're like, but then I have my kids, what do I do? But I think the important thing is remembering that, like, taking care of yourself first. Let's put our mask on first before helping our kids, and then being able to have them see what you're doing and having them witness you taking care of yourself, and that's a form of self-love. So not only did I need to change my mindset and that limiting belief to be able to continue with movement, to use it as a tool to get myself better so that I could go back to work and go back to or continue momming. And then also they got to see me, like I do yoga in the morning and some morning movement every morning now, which has been extremely important in terms of my own recovery. And they see it, and sometimes they join me, sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And so the other day, my daughter I think she felt a little bit stressed. She was like, okay, we're just going to twist, we're going to do our breaths. And I was like, oh, you see it. And it was kind of this like aha moment of like, they really are watching.
Wonderful.
And then reducing the stress. It's there's a lot of guilt that comes from recovering in front of your kids and worrying about the effect it's going to have on them, regardless of what kind of recovery. Yeah. So I think it's also providing them with life experience and tools, and it's everyone's journey, and with a purpose behind that, I think.
So for those watching that don't understand the analogy, it's on an airplane, they say, with the oxygen mask comes down, but yours on first before you put on the loved ones, because if you end up passing out, you won't be able to put your loved ones on anyways. And this is an anecdote we use in the recovery addiction world all over the place, to saying, don't worry about your job, don't worry about your kids, don't worry about those things. You have to get healthy first, or you're not going to have those things anyways. So we have to prioritize ourselves.
And I think, it's such a good point, because I think that that's something that as you are recovering from, again, whatever it is, people always expect you to actually go back to work first, or do this first, or and then anything that's self-care, self-love, or taking care of yourself should be, anything that brings joy should be last. But then we're not meeting our human needs.
Agreed.
And so we really need to flip it. And I think that one of the biggest things in terms of supporting somebody who is recovering from anything that we can't really see, whether it is addiction recovery, whether it is concussion recovery, is to encourage them to do something that brings them joy, because that's going to have a physical, emotional, spiritual impact, whatever it is, on them. And they're going to be able to heal much faster. And the minute we make somebody feel guilty or shame them for doing that, which that's very much part of my story, was, oh, well, you're starting to move a little bit again, you must be fine. And me going, I am not fine, but I'm trying. And this is my way of getting to that. So the best thing you can say to friends and family of anybody who is recovering is encourage them to continue to do what they love and brings them joy with zero guilt. And allowing them to do that. That's really important as a parent, and then also as anybody.
Really, I don't hear that enough, and I'm glad that you brought it up. It really is, from many lenses of healing, from any type of thing, where you're like, oh, you have to prioritize the things that we think you should prioritize. And you're right, it's being human first, and there's certainly some lacking compassion in the idea of being human first, and that's where the stigma comes in, because we just lack compassion. We think everybody should know and understand things the way I understand things. and you should prioritize things that I prioritize.
And somebody feeling that guilt and feeling misunderstood and not supported in that way, that is going to affect their recovery. It affected mine, certainly. So it has an impact. If we want somebody to recover, let's create more experiences for them where they can feel joy and where they can connect to the community and to others, and where they can feel seen and understood, and where they can enjoy life again, because we lose a sense of self, like, who am I now? It's important for us to step back into that, be able to just feel that joy and to be able to connect in that way and feel seen. So I think that's a really important part, which is why this is so important, which is why community events that include everyone are so important, why giving the opportunity and making certain activities accessible to all is essential in terms of allowing, whoever is going through recovery to do so.
You had mentioned on the show, the last show that you're on, that you decided to stop drinking as a result. We only got a couple of minutes left, but I would love it if you could just tell me what that experience has been like, taking alcohol out of your life.
Yeah, I think, I didn't drink too much before the accident, but certainly I took it down a little bit after the accident because, you're already under so much stress. But in May, I decided to fully cut out alcohol because I was like, I just need to give myself a full chance to heal. And I was, at this point, I was willing to do anything. And it has certainly helped my brain and my recovery. And I've really realized, wow, I don't actually need it to have fun. And I get to be present. And I get to connect with the community in that way. So it's been very, very helpful.
So the one thing I would like for you to answer to the audience quickly is, part of the stigma and the problem that we have is that it's such a cultural norm. It's so normal to just drink all the time. Is it that difficult? Have you been excommunicated from from the world? Have you been left out of all things, or?
Surprisingly not. I have had a lot of questions like, wait, you're not having a drink? Like, you're not gonna have a drink, but like, it's this, or we're here. And my family's been very supportive. For them, like, it was an adjustment because, like, I would have a glass of wine every day. Like, it was part of my life and my lifestyle. So, but people have been pretty supportive. I still have a lot of friends. It took a little while to get used to, actually, but it was okay. And I've gotten to be much more present. But I think creating opportunities where drinking isn't necessarily associated to the activity is very important, and it makes it a little bit easier for those that are not drinking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you having you today. And that was Cynthia. And we're going to tell everybody out there to get out and move and be creative and have fun. And thank you for watching Invisible, Breaking Through the Stigma of Addiction.